clutch of fear, darkness, monsters, blackness.
Hey, Composer Gloves here, and today we are going to be talking about the 3 oscillator plugin tabs. You might be saying, you skipped the sampler channel. Well, you may have noticed, if you're here recently, that I recently did 2 videos on the sampler channel. It's a pretty universal thing, so just go check out those videos. They will explain everything there is to know about here, and even the mysterious missing option. Whoa. So, okay, now onto this. These are where your synthesis really begins to take dynamic turns. We're going to be covering these tabs, the filter, and the envelopes and LFOs. Now, I expect you to know what envelopes and LFOs are, and filters for that matter, from my sound and synth basics. I will not be explaining them as very, very basic things. Well, I pretty much will be, but I'm going to be running over them very quickly. So you want to know and have some background information so you can grab onto it and begin to make sounds. Okay, so we have an LFO. We have 3 different LFO options. We have a square wave, a triangle wave, and a sine wave. In order to turn, so this one controls panning. So remember, an LFO is a low frequency oscillation. However, this LFO is a little tricky because you can actually oscillate faster than 20 cycles. So you can also do types of modulation, namely amplitude modulation in this case, because panning is, the amount of volume in one of your headphones or your sides of your headphones or speakers compared to the other side. So if you turn one on and off fast enough, guess what? You're turning the volume up and down, and that is amplitude modulation. So if you turn your speed, so first you have to turn your amount up. So you have your amount. If you invert your amount, you get the inverted version of the wave. If you really want extensive options with panning, you do not have to do it here. You can instead automate this panning knob using one of the various automation things we have: Fruity Peak controller, Fruity Formula controller, or even the control surface if you want to get really crazy. Go check out those videos in my FO12 effects series in case you want a more dynamic way to control panning. So let me show you the amplitude modulation. So we're going to turn the all the way up so you can hear it going. Now if we turn it slower, you hear it doing like regular panning jazz, but fast. Oh yeah. So that's amplitude modulation. You should be very familiar with that from the previous video in this series. If not, go look up my video on ring modulation because ring modulation is like a type of amplitude modulation. It is in my Citrus series, Citrus from the ground up. So you could pick different waves. You get different types of modulations, or you could just, do the panning. Very cool. So amount, you can ramp it in. As you can hear, it comes in. This is like a really long ramp. Don't trust this image. It does not. That is really slow. So this is like, that's a little more reasonable. This is great for organ type sounds. Check it out. So again, very good for organ type sounds. And you have a delay, so you can delay it before it comes in. Let me turn it down. So you can delay it and ramp it. So very, very smooth. Now you have these 2 options down here. What are these? Well, let's talk about them. Okay, so I'm going to turn it up just so it's a little more obvious what we're doing. So tempo, if we speed our tempo up or down. Sure. You notice that it doesn't change. If we click our tempo knob though, it changes with our tempo now. So that's a very important thing to be aware of. It will change with the tempo when you have that on. Now you have global. What is that? Well, if I hit, let's go to something that's a little like 127, sure. Now you notice if I hit another note and it's not in time with the time I hit my first note, meaning it doesn't land on a beat or a subdivision of the beat. MIDI music theory, again, if you want to know what that means, but it goes 1 and 2 and 3 and. So it doesn't land on a 1 and it does not land on an and. It will sound out of sync. Now if I hit them at the same time, that's what it should be. This modulation of the panning should be the same. That's what I want in this case. I don't want it to sound like this. what I can do to ensure it's always the same is hit this global knob. What that means is this is common in FM8. It's a very common thing. When I hit my first note, that's going to set out the global panning thing. So whenever I hit new notes, they will just sync up their panning with the panning of my first note. So yeah, maybe you don't want it, maybe that on, I don't know. That way it's not so like you fill up your stereo image a bit more. See, you make decisions based on things. With bass notes, if you're doing bass design in here, that could be a very important setting to be aware of. These are not the only places it shows up, but that's what it means in all cases. Same with the LFO, it's just a controlling signal. We'll talk about filters when we get to these tabs. So volume. Okay, so this is an envelope. You should know what envelopes are based on my previous, in Sound Synth Basics. So you've watched that. You know what envelopes are kind of. And so you see here we have an attack setting. So how quickly our sound comes in, you have to turn it on with this envelope. If you tweak any of these knobs, it assumes you want it on. So be careful. You might be sound designing and then, you turn your envelope on. You didn't mean to. So be aware of that. You can hear it beginning to come in. I'm going to turn this this panning off. Now, how do you turn it off? You might be saying, oh my gosh, how do I get rid of this panning? There's no off button like there is on the envelope. Well, it's the amount. You have to turn the amount off. So in case you were unaware of that, that one can get you if you're not paying attention. Like occasionally I'll go in and if there's no off button, I'm like, how do I turn this thing off? I don't want it on. And then it turns out, oh yeah, of course, that thing. So anyways, we're here, envelopes, and we play it, and we got our thing going. We can make it take longer. We can delay it coming in. So we could like do something like that. Why would you want to do that? I don't know. It's up to you. You notice we have a tempo thing here also. So this will make it relative to the tempo up here. Now you'll notice that this thing does not give you options as far as how your envelopes interact with new notes. And they all just re-trigger an envelope. So that's just the way life is. There's no way to make it so that it ramps up, and then all following notes go do afterwards. So it's just, they gotta live with life. You may not have even thought of that as a limitation if you're new to sound design. You may not even think, but there are synthesizers that prioritize notes so that once you ramp up to volume, all notes after that will start at their volume. Very useful for sounds that have long ramp-ins for whatever reason, and then you want the notes to then be triggered at maximum volume later. But this doesn't have it, so I don't know why I'm telling you about it. You have hold. Hold function is how long it holds up here. Could be important to you before it hits your decay stage, which is this guy right here. You can adjust that here, how long it decays. Remember, this is deceptively longer than it looks, because this is like this is like instant. So, and then you go over here and you're like, oh, that's not that big of a change. And then you come to find out that that is an enormous change. So just be aware of stuff like that. Sustain is after your decay phase. So whenever your sound stops. Now, I'm talking about all this to volume. This applies for any parameter. So this could be like your filter turns on, and which is actually what happens to be these. So we'll talk about that in a second. But anyways, after it's your decay, if you want your note to infinitely sustain and have no decay, then you turn it all the way up. So there's all sorts of weird limitations with envelopes, like one of the ones that I discussed earlier. This is a pretty good envelope. It will serve most sound design needs. So again, you can turn your sustain up and it will now sustain forever at maximum volume, or you could adjust that somewhere else. And then when you let go of the key, you will have a release setting. If you leave it like this, it will click at the end. Actually, in this case, it won't click. Wow. Some of them, the synthesizers, that means that this maximum, it has a little ramp off, even though it doesn't look like it does, because it should click. But it doesn't click. So we got lucky there. On the attack though, you can hear the click there. So that's a true attack. It could be even clickier. I believe there's even then at the tiniest of tiny ramps. But anyways, you may consider. So sometimes to solve clicks, you just put a really tiny attack and release at the end. So very, very simple. Lots of great sounds. It's to emulate sounds. So like, for example, violins, they get loud. They stay loud for as long as the person's bowing. When they let go, if they're in a reverberant room, they'll probably have a little bit longer of a release time. Brass, they get loud. But on the other hand, like a plucked harp will have like a doom. And then so I'll have a long release time and a fast attack time, but not a very long sustain time. So stuff like that. Now you do have these cool options underneath. You have these tension handles. It's very easy to see. Look at that. It's a bowing concave or What is the other? Inverse, concave, concave, and convex. I forgot like the fancy term. I'm pretty sure it's convex. I know one of them's concave. And what it is, it just pushes the shape in and out. It's pretty self-explanatory, very useful for getting particular kinds of shapes. If this is not enough for you, if you want a more exact ability to control this, I recommend going to the, is it control surface? No, it's not. What the heck am I doing? Not control surface. There is filter, flanger, controller, not peak controller, XY, I've forgotten the name of it. That's my issue. It's by MIDI out. Where's the MIDI out plugin? Or does it not appear? It doesn't appear in this list. That's why I'm confused. Okay, there we go. Fruity keyboard controller. No. So, if this is not specific enough volume envelope wise, you want more power volume envelope wise, you want to be able to control it with more than just this tension handle or whatever, you can. It's a little more complicated, but you can come in here to the Fruity envelope controller, and you can link the volume knob to one of these controllers, and you can then use this envelope, which gives you all the curve options that you could ever want. You have that option, and you have like this option. You know, you have all these options. Like, look at that. Like, who wouldn't want that as a volume envelope? However, I would just recommend going to a more powerful synthesizer that has that built in, such as Massive. Massive has all sorts of nifty features for things like this. Actually, their envelopes are straight. You could use Harmer if you really want to get specific. So anyways, you're probably not here though because it's like the fanciest synthesizer in the world. But you have these tension handles. If it's underneath that controller, it controls that tension handle. You have an LFO to control the volume. I'm going to leave it there. Now, we move on to mod X and Y. Now we have filters. Go watch my filter video and filter basics video in my Sound Synth Basics series. Now, I'm going to assume you know what those are. So you have a low pass, band pass, blah, 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 blah. These FFVs are state variable filters. And so they're just different types. They're both low passes, as you can see. So they're state variable, but they're low pass. It's the way the filter does its job. So filters are like a crazy, crazy topic. Like we have a fast low pass and then we have like a regular low pass. You might be wondering, what's the difference and what's the deal with the state variable low pass? Well, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this. There's linear filters. What are they? The IIR and FIR, which is infinite impulse response and finite impulse response. It gets quite nerdy very quickly. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to make this apparent. So the difference between the way filters do things affects things like phase shifts, curves, where the phase shifts occur, how steep the filter can get. As you can see, this one, it actually tells you it's a 12 dB low pass state variable filter, whereas this one's a 24 dB per octave. Usually the steeper the cutoff, the more phase shifting occurs. This might be a little too advanced for some of you guys, but you see 12 dB, 12 dB. So it's stuff that you need to go watch the basics video if you really want to get it. And maybe a couple videos on filtering somewhere else. I don't know. But anyways, fast, low pass. When you move that knob, that value is the value it is at. It is fast. It matches it right away. There's no curve built into it. So if you were to automate this, it would, you hear it doing right away. But if we do like just regular low pass, it won't be quite as sharp. And we get clicking. So if we do it fast enough, we get clicking. This is also known as zipper noise. So the fast low pass has been built in a way that probably has greater phase shift occurrences. But if you're going to be using it, it shouldn't be an issue because you want a fast low pass. You're going to be doing something quickly. And there's no zipper noise on it. So anyways, this is the mod X is the cutoff frequency. So that's the cutoff frequency. Mod Y is the resonance. If you don't know what resonance is, then you haven't watched my videos on it yet on filters. But anyways, resonance is wherever your cutoff is. So let's say that this is my cutoff. I will have a boost in wherever my cutoff is at. So if I move it around, my cutoff will follow it around. Pretend this is an easier. So here's my cutoff. It's a high pass filter. And you see it's wherever I move it, it moves too. And so it boosts the frequencies right there. That is a resonance. So you see we have a separate envelope and it's the same envelope as before. And it controls this parameter. Something you should be aware of is you have this amount. This amount can be flipped both ways. So this means that one direction controls it turning up and down like this. So when it turns up, it is going up. And then one direction signifies that the bottom is maximum. And when it turns up, it turns off. Could be useful for you. Maybe not. And then you have this last one, which is a really cool option, which is pitch. What is the deal with pitch? Well, it sounds just like it is. So you've watched my videos on pitch and sound basics. That's why I keep referring to it, because it's literally there to cover all this stuff so that when you see it in a synthesizer, you can immediately take advantage of it. So you have an LFO for it and an envelope for it. All you need to do now is apply the knowledge you gain there, so we can delay it, turn it up, turn it down. So that's that. If you have any questions, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.
Wow.